I want to tell you that book was put together by cutting and pasting. Young people often wonder, how did you cut and paste in pre-computer days? Well, you did it with scissors and paste. Kids think that is far out. You know, really amazing stuff. But we really did it. We pasted and cut it, and it was, and the typesetting was done on Spring Street in a little tiny building there by the Kevin and Rebecca Dwan and some helpers, 3 of whom are quite well-known writers in their own right these days. Steve Sanfield, the poet and storyteller, was one of the people that typed on my first manuscript and on hers. Scott McLean was another one. Well, I had some really talented people doing some really basic kind of stuff, but nobody else had a computer. The Dwans were doing some of the very first. They were doing experimental work for IBM, and but Juanita bought a computer. It had a screen, a little 5-inch green screen, K-Pro computer, one of the very first. And I was fascinated with that, and she had it in her bedroom. And I always liked to kid about the fact that how much time I used to spend with Juanita in her bedroom. But it was true, and I learned how to use the computer there. She taught me how to use the computer, and I got a K-Pro too. And so we were working, I was working on my books and her books, and she was working on her books and giving me advice on my books. And we had a very wonderful working relationship, and her husband, Pete, was he was a brilliant man who was doing things that you didn't expect a brilliant man to do, just because he liked doing them. I mean, he was not a poser in any way, but a wonderful guy to be around. I'll tell you an interesting little thing about the Browns. They won't mind me telling them, because all of their friends knew this. Juanita hated to cook. She hated to shop. He loved to cook. He loved to shop. So they made a deal. He did all the household shopping. He did all the cooking. He could make as much a mess as he wanted. She cleaned up afterwards. And she didn't mind cleaning up. Had some wonderful meals there, and we all waited till Juanita got through cleaning up afterwards to continue the conversations. Okay. 1980s, we had a recession. I'd forgotten we had the recession until this latest one came along and they started talking about that. And of course I knew they were all haywire comparing it to the 1980s. They should have been comparing it to the 1930s. As Gage, I see Gage, you've got here tonight. How in the world did you get here? He wasn't supposed to come. I mean, he wanted to, but they wouldn't let him out of class. But anyway, he's here. And he wrote this wonderful book about the 1930s. And all of those who haven't read that book yet, you need to read it, because you need to know what's coming. I mean, it's not over yet. It's not over yet, folks. There's some more chapters. And but the 1980s recession did have a little jolt. The neat thing was that we were prepared for it, because when Artis and I got married, we decided we had to figure out some way to make a living up here, good times and bad times, because by then we were learning enough about the history to know that there are bad times were going to come every now and then. And so that was one of the things that made me decide that book publishing was the way to do it. That when I came back up here, when I quit the press and came up here, I had made arrangements to do freelance work for various publishers. But I also knew that, you know, unless you've got a bunch of money in the bank, it gets tough when things slow down a little bit. So we decided we'd build our own house. And we'd pay for it. No loans or anything else. We'd pay for it because if you could get rid of rent, if you could get rid of mortgages, that gave you a big comfort zone there. That was money that you could either spend on something else or just not spend at all and not be in trouble. And it worked in the 1980s. Even though all my customers slowed down, were sending me 1/5 as much work as before, but some funny things happened about them. Some people who had retired, people in their 60s and 70s, started coming along. They'd heard about, from one person or another, contacts at the press, this kind of thing, that I might be able to help them publish a book. And each one of them had one book. It was the book of their life. And they had one book. And we worked together, and I had enough of those come along there that it took the place of all these other things. And it opened up a whole new interesting avenue, too. And so that since that time, people say, well, what kind of things do you do on a book? And I say, everything. I say, I'll write them, I'll edit them, I'll index them, I'll illustrate them, I'll make maps for them, I'll design them, I'll get them published, whatever you want, or whatever part of this that you want. Because by then I'd found what I really loved to do was books. Besides, I like to read them. I love to read books. Okay. In, what was it, about 1990, we made a trip back to New York. I had published 2 books about Rensselaerville, about the people in Rensselaerville, because these letters went back and forth. People are talking about what they're doing back in Rensselaerville, what they're doing here. And the Searles estate didn't live here all the time. During the Civil War, part of the Civil War, they wound up going back and living in New York for a while, then came back after the war. So there were things actively going on, and I found the people back in Rensselaerville thought I was writing a book about New York, with people who occasionally went to California. It was kind of fun. But I'd written these 2 books that dealt with the 1840s and the 1850s. I hadn't got to the 1860s yet. I hadn't gotten to the Civil War. I hadn't got to the silver discoveries. And I thought, about time I went back there and saw this place I've been writing about, describing it. And just for fun, I decided we'd go on a back road. We'd approach it from the west. Normally you would come in from the east. So we come in this back road. And it's beginning to get a little more familiar. And pretty soon I said, all right, so we're going through it. It's all country, winding roads and all the, it's the kind of stuff that we have around here. And I said, Arliss, I have a hunch that around the next bend or the couple of bends from now, we're going to come by where the old Rensselaerville Academy used to be. And she said, what'll it look like? And he said, it won't look like anything. It's been torn down. It's not there anymore. But that's where it's going to be. And we went around and found there was where it was supposed to be. There was a store there now. We did a little checking, and yeah, this is where the academy used to be. So I thought, aha, now I know where we are. We're going to go and we're going to make an S-curve, we're going to cross a bridge, and we're going to be right downtown in Rensselaerville. And we went down, turned, went over the bridge, and there we were. I said, and we were supposed to go and stay with the people who had been giving me these letters over the years. And I said, tell you what, before we go, we're a little bit early, would you like me to take you on a tour of Rensselaerville? She said, well, sure. So I said, all right, we're going to go up this street here. And I said, and there's where so-and-so lives, and over there is where so-and-so lives. And that's where they did this and that. We went all over the town, and then we went to our host and hostess' house and went and stayed with them. And the next day they wanted to take us on a tour. I said, I already did it, but I said, I'll take you on a tour. and so, well, they said, we wanted to take you over to the house where where actually the Niles family lived. See, Niles Searle's wife was his cousin, and she was Mary Niles. And so this is the Niles house, and when Niles's family had moved up to Canada, but he kept coming down to Rensselaerville to go to school. And so he would board with the Niles family. So lots of these letters were written in this house. A big 2-story house. I had drawn pictures of it from old photos and stuff. It looked just like it. The trees were bigger.